Oilers, Avalanche, Canada, USA, Battle of Greatness, McDavid, MacKinnon, Makar, Draisaitl. That's right, there is plenty of storylines to talk about right now between the Edmonton Oilers and the Colorado Avalanche, who will meet Tuesday night in the Western Conference Finals in what promises to be one of the best playoff showdowns of all time. You can bank on it. I am going to walk you through everything to do with this series. We're going to compare lines. We're going to talk about the great players between McDavid and MacKinnon and Makar and Draisaitl. We're going to talk about goalies. We're going to use advanced stats. We're going to use charts. We're going to use eye tests. We're going to use data. And at the end of this, you're going to get Coach Ryan D's pick for who he thinks is going to win this series. But that isn't why we're here. We're here to get a preview of this series. You are going to stay tuned till the end because you are going to nerd out and understand the key storylines going into this series. And you're going to be able to make up your own decision using our data as to what narrative you want to pick. Spoiler alert, the narratives at the end are the greatness of the Edmonton Oilers, led by Connor McDavid, doing something that hasn't been done in the playoffs since 2008? Or are you looking at the balance and the depth of the Colorado Avalanche? Let's go ahead and talk about it. You know, we have talked about many things in these playoff previews, but between these two teams, what we are going to have to break down first is the lines and the pairs. Then we're going to have to break down the coaching and how they're deploying their lines and their pairs. Then we're going to have to talk about the goalies. Then we're going to go ahead and talk about special teams. We're going to bring up the X Factor players, the elites, the best of the best in the West, baby. Then we're going to go ahead and make a pick. But stay tuned because I have something to share with you about Connor McDavid that will absolutely blow your mind. What Connor McDavid is doing right now is LeBron James level. You heard me say that. NBA superstar carry level. But you're going to have to stay tuned to the end of the video to figure out why. And then you are going to have to decide how you want to take the data that we present you in this video, how you're going to want to frame it in your own head heading into this series, because there's a lot of ways to take it, but the data is the data. And don't forget, our channel and these prediction videos are always brought to you by BetUS. Head over to betus.com, use promo code HGS or the link down below to get started betting on hockey, betting on sports. You get 125% playoff bonus right now. That's like free money to bet on the Oilers and the Avs, series winner, game by game, or cup winner. Head over to BetUS. All proceeds go to help this channel if you're over the age of majority in your state or province. Line one between the Oilers and the Avalanche. We have the Kane, McDavid, and Draisaitl line against the Landeskog, MacKinnon, and Landeskog line. We know that these lines aren't always set, and then McDavid has played with a bunch of different combinations, and MacKinnon has played with a few different combinations, but this is the status quo that we're going to use heading into this series. So the Kane, McDavid, and Draisaitl line have 8 goals for, 1 goal against. That is 9.45 goals per 60. That is an NHL best. That is blowing it up. That's records. That is greatness on a different level. And their goals against in 60, 1.18. These guys are outscoring any problem the Edmonton Oilers may or may not have. You can correct a lot of things and win a Stanley Cup with a line that's going to do this. Never seen this before. Their expected goals for should have been 3.1. They scored 8. Their expected goals against 2.7. It was only 1. Their expected goals for 60, 3.66. Their expected goals against per 60, 3.19. This line is supposed to be able to outscore. It's supposed to have some defensive challenges. It does not. This line right now is overperforming to the stratosphere. The question is, if you're an Oilers or an Avs fan, does it hold? Stay tuned. We got more on these guys. Landeskog, MacKinnon, and Landeskog. 3-1 goals for versus goals against in the real world. 4.78 goals for in the real world. That's amazing. That is super high on 1.59 against. When Bednar switched the wingers here and he ended up moving Rantanen down to Kadri, this line performed better than MacKinnon with Rantanen. So this is executing a coach's decision in the real world using data This line performs better with Nathan MacKinnon than Rantanen and Nichushkin. They are expected to get 2.2 goals for. They beat that at 3. They were expected to have 1 against. They tied that with 1. They were expected a 3.50. They beat it with 4.78. And they were expected 1.6 or 1.59, and they tied it. I would say this line is slightly overperforming or performing as advertised. Either way, it's a great line. Taking a look at the Nugent-Hopkins, Puljujärvi, and Hyman line. And remember, we know Hyman can join Kane and Draisaitl. It's all over the place. We'll get to it, but this is the set line too that Woodcroft uses. Goals for are 2 and 1 in the entire playoffs. Not much to shake a stick at. That calculates out to 3.5 goals per 60 or 1.75 goals per 60, but we're only dealing with a sample size of 3. Their expected goals for were 1.6. Their expected goals against were 1.6. They were expected to be a 500 line in the playoffs, so they are slightly overperforming, but when we're dealing with such a small sample size, you can also say they're performing as expected. Nichushkin, Kadri, Rantanen. Mikko Rantanen has had a troubling playoffs for a guy that's had 11 points. No matter who Rantanen plays with, whether it is MacKinnon or whether it is Kadri, Rantanen's line has struggled defensively, and you can see that here as well too. The benefit though by Jason Bednar is that by moving Landeskog up with Nathan MacKinnon, that line is overperforming and it is making up for the difficulties with Rantanen. When you take a look at who Rantanen plays with, it is better for him to play with Kadri right now statistically, but this line is unfortunately underperforming as to where it can and should be. They have 2 goals for, 3 goals against, 3.27 goals for 60, and 4.91 goals against per 60 minutes. They were expected to get 1.4 goals for. They were expected to only have 1 goal against. They have 3. They were expected for 2.29 goals per 60. They're improved there. They're up. However, it's the defensive woes. Goals against, they were only expected to have 1.64. Well, guess what? It's 4.91. This line is underperforming. And folks, if you want to read through this on your own and get more detailed, you're going to head over to moneypuck.com. You're going to go ahead and you're going to take a look at their NHL line stats. This is where we're pulling the data from. So you can see every combination of every line. You can see what their expected goals for. You can see what their expected goals are against. And you can click the drop down menu here and you can see actual goals for and actual goals against. So you can see there's obviously a lot of line mixing and matching that's been happening. We can only talk about pairs as they're set right now. Go ahead, play through this a little bit yourself and you'll get more perspective. Okay, let's continue on to line 3. Line 3 for the Oilers is the McLeod line. McLeod, Fogel, Yamamoto. This line, no goals. No goals is a line, but no goals against. That's a huge key. We talk about the third line and the fourth line for the Oilers. We gotta say, it is key that the third and the fourth line don't get scored on and don't take penalties. You're just looking to get a rest with this line and keep pucks out of your net because the top 6 for the Oilers is going to do the damage. McDavid is going to do the damage. Expected goals for, they're actually expected to be a little bit below 500. So this line combination is expected to do 0.6, 0.7 for goals for versus goals against. That's basically a 500 line. They are not expected based on their play in this playoffs to contribute a lot offensively, and they have not. So this line is performing as advertised, or maybe even slightly better because no goals have gone in. Burakovsky, Kuemper, and Aube-Kubel. This has been a big line for the Colorado Avalanche. Right now, they have 3 goals for, 1 goal against, so they are overperforming in terms of their expectations. Their expectations were have 2 goals for, 3 goals against. So this is not only doing what needs to be done as a third line, which means not getting scored on, but they're providing positive offensive impact for the Colorado Avalanche. This is a big advantage for the Avalanche to be able to have a third line that can chip in offensively. And this is the line that has stayed together the second most besides the Rantanen, MacKinnon, and Nichushkin line, which we know has been broken up now. This line has gotten the second most amount of minutes in the playoffs as a singular line, so they have a lot of chemistry together. Line 4, the line we don't really focus too much on, it's the Derek Ryan, Archibald, Cassian line. These guys have 0 goals for, 2 goals against. That's not what you're looking for from line 4. You just want to keep pucks out of the net and get a rest. That's unfortunate. However, again, Edmonton has outscored all their problems anyway. Expected goals against, this line is actually expected to get scored on more than they should. And that is why Jay Woodcroft, and you'll see it when we break down the ice time, has been hiding and keeping this line with very limited minutes. Why would you put out a line that is supposed to hurt you based on how they were going to play? Woodcroft has been an excellent coach in juggling his lines. Cogliano, Helm, and O'Connor. There's a few different combinations here of the Helm line, but he is the one centerpiece that is always consistent. Line 4 for Colorado is supposed to just be even Steven, and they are. They end up doing what they're supposed to do, which is get a rest. But we also know the Helm line got that big goal that ended up sending them to the Western Conference Final. It just wasn't this combination in particular. So the Helm line, it doesn't matter if it's Cogliano, O'Connor, or if you add Sturm into it. There's a few different combinations of lines here. Line 4 is doing what it needs to do for the Colorado Avalanche, but for either team, this isn't a big deal. Defensive pair times. The horses on the back, the big guys that end up eating up all the minutes. Nurse and Ceci are pair 1, 15 goals for, 10 goals against, 5.5 goals per 60, 3.7 goals against per 60. They are overperforming, baby, and that's what you want. That is good. Nurse and Ceci are generating offense. They were expected to have 9.5 goals for and 9.1 goals against. Well, it's 15 and 10. So they are overperforming in the best way. If you're an Oilers fan, you got to be stoked about this. They are supposed to have 3.51 goals per 60. Well, 5.55. You're going to take that all day. And they're performing as expected defensively because they are supposed to have 3.63 against. Well, they have 3.7 against. So Edmonton does it. I would love to see my number one pair having less goals against and less expected goals against. But you know what? If you're going to overperform in the goal department, that is a good thing as well, too. Now, when we're ranking defensemen, X marks the spot. Expected goals for 60, expected goals against per 60. This is a better data point for defensemen based on how they are playing than the actual goals per 60. Why? Because defensemen are very volatile. So forwards, you can use the actual numbers. For defense, you want to use expected numbers. It's just the way math works, but we have both going here. Then we go ahead and look at Toews and Makar, the horses on the back end for the Avs, the premium defensive pairing of this series. Well, they have 10 goals for and 7 goals against. That's good enough for 3.91 goals per 60, and that is good enough for 2.75 goals per 60. However, when we look at their expected goals for, this is why these guys, the horses, 9.1 goals expected for. So that's right up there with the CC Nurse line, but goals against 5.5. That's pretty awesome. So these guys are better at keeping the puck out of the net. They may not be scoring as much, but if I'm going into a playoff series, I want people that are going to contribute offensively, but more importantly, contribute defensively on the back end. And that is what you're getting with Toews and Makar over CC and Nurse. So you're getting all gas and all offense versus balance with Toews and Makar. Speaking of balance, Keith and Bouchard versus Johnson and Manson. Now, when we think of balance, the Edmonton Oilers are actually running a very balanced top 6. The Avs in their pairing are running a very top-heavy top 6. So it's interesting when you take a look at these stats, but we'll get to time on ice. Keith and Bouchard are actually outpacing Nurse and Ceci in the minutes department. They have 8 goals for, 10 goals against. That's good enough for 2.88 goals per 60, 3.6 goals against per 60. But we go to the magic number for defensemen, which has the X. 8.3 goals for, 8.3 goals against. These guys are expected to be a 500 defensive unit pairing. And when your top 4 for defensemen are expected to have about 3 goals per 60 against, that can make you a little uneasy going into the playoffs, especially with Mike Smith between the pipes. So the way they're playing is that your top 4, they're not really a shutdown pair. So Edmonton, whether you agree with me or not, I'm not having an opinion on it. I'm just telling you what the data says. And what the data says is they're expected based on their play in the playoffs, not on numbers that are made up. It's how they're playing. Based on their play in the playoffs, they are expected to have 3 and 3.63 between pair 1 and pair 2 for the Edmonton Oilers. That can be a little nerve-wracking going in. Johnson and Manson, not a huge amount of offense here. 1 goal versus 1 goal against. Why? Because Girard is out. With Girard being out, Johnson ends up stepping in. This pairing statistically has played to a pairing that is actually a little less productive than what you'd want. So when you take a look at the X factor, it should be 0.6 goals for, 0.9 goals against. That means they should get more goals scored on them than they're producing. It's a little nerve-wracking, but what do you expect when a top 3 defenseman like Girard goes out with a broken sternum? They end up doing this because we're going to see how the third pairing is doing. They didn't want to break it up. Bednar wanted to keep consistency. However, because it's so close and we're dealing with such a small sample size with Johnson and Manson, there's really nothing to worry about here. The numbers are too small. They haven't played together for a long enough period of time to really give us a good sample, but that is what it's saying about pair 2 between the Oilers and the Avs. Pair 3, Kulak and Barrie. Comments down below about how great Kulak is as a pickup. Totally agree. The balance the Edmonton Oilers have with ice time on their back end is huge. So 5 goals for, 5 goals, 4 goals against. Bleh. For the Kulak-Barrie line, the offensive defenseman versus the defensive defenseman. Really nice pairing. These guys, as actual goal scorers, they're producing more than they're letting in. 2.34 goals per 60 against 1.87 goals against per 60. X marks the spot. They are projected to have 5.9 goals for and 5.7 goals against. They are slightly above 500, but again, that number of 2.67, we have a 2.67, we have a 2.99, and a 3.63 for all 3 pairings to the Edmonton Oilers for expected goals against. There really isn't a shutdown pairing on the Edmonton Oilers line. So the Oilers, in terms of pairs, are going to have to outscore their problems. So far, they have. The other Johnson, Eric Johnson, and Boehm Byram. Byram has been a little bit of a revelation here. You got Bouchard, you got Byram, 2 young defensemen in these series that everybody is watching and looking at. Future elite stars of this league. I fully agree with that for both these guys. When you take a look at this pair, though, this pair has been absolutely on fire. 5 goals for, 1 goal against. No wonder they didn't move or break up either of these two when Girard got hurt. They are magic. You do not want to break this line up. Keep them together. They have 4.02 goals per 60, and they have 0.8 goals against per 60. They are expected to have 3.05 goals per 60, and they are expected to have 1.53 goals against per 60. This is a really good third pairing. You get a lot of value out of this third pairing. This is defensive third pairing that is also scoring goals. That's the magic of Boehm Byram. Only one position left, right? It's the goalie. Now, after last games, the goalie numbers got a little bit of a bump, and thank goodness, because these guys were not performing well statistically in the playoffs, not compared to the East and not compared to an average NHL goaltender. There are 3 key categories we look at when evaluating goalies: save percentage, goals against, and game score above average, GSAA. GSAA is the money stat, baby. This is what says you are doing excellent. And a goaltender with a score of 1.00 is a goaltender that is NHL average. Not average in the playoffs, not average in a small sample size, no making excuses for this happened in the series and that happened in the series, so the average is skewed. No. All NHL goalies average out to 1. So a replaceable goalie is a 1. You're above a 1, you're doing better than replacement. You're below a 1, you are not doing super well, especially compared to the money you may or may not get being paid right now in the playoffs. Smitty is out-dueling Kuemper. There's a lot of people going into this series saying Darcy Kuemper is the better goalie. Darcy Kuemper is the better goalie overall, but he is not the better goalie in the playoffs, and that's all that matters. Mike Smith, when he's hot, he can be really hot, and the dangerous thing about Smith here is that we're looking at averages. Smitty don't play on no averages. Smitty's either at the bottom of the roller coaster, the game's over and they're going to lose by 8, or Smitty's at the top of the roller coaster and he is going beast mode, baby, and he is keeping pucks out of the net and making saves that goalies shouldn't be making, and that's the way Mike Smith rolls. When he's hot, he is on fire, and when he's cold, he is ice. He is very rarely ever in the middle, and when we're looking at averages on Smitty, we're talking about the middle. So maybe when you look at this, you got to take into account the fact that if you get the Mike Smith that's hot, could be game over. Darcy Kuemper, on the other hand, has not had a hot performance in the playoffs yet. He just has been kind of yuck, and I think this is the biggest Achilles heel right now for the Colorado Avalanche. We're going to look at more of their data. We're going to look at their points. The Colorado Avalanche have been the best team in the NHL playoffs minus the goalie. And that is really nerve-wracking because you need a goalie to put up a top 10 performance to win a Stanley Cup. Mike Smith has a very good save percentage at 9.27, goals against average 2.70, GSAA money stat 2.11. Darcy Kuemper comes in at a save percentage of 904. That isn't going to get it done in the playoffs. Not against the Oilers, folks. A GSAA of 0.07. This is what I mean. I'm not just telling you through eye tests. If you've been on this channel for some time, you know very well that I've broken down every goal, every goalie interaction in the playoffs this year. So it's not just my eyes that are telling you that Darcy Kuemper isn't doing well. The data is backing it up. That's what we use data for, baby, to remove our bias and confirm what our eyes are seeing, or tell us, maybe we're not seeing this properly, but we are seeing Kuemper properly. He's not doing very well. The other things that we're seeing properly is the analytics here on Hot Garbage Sports. You guys have been crazy. You've been giving us thumbs up like you wouldn't believe. You have been smashing subscribe down below like you wouldn't believe. You have been joining the Discord. You guys have been amazing, awesome. The views, the watch time, unbelievable. I couldn't do it without all of you. Hey, if you're new here and you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Go down below. It's free. Just click that little button, that little red button. It's free. We'll show up in your homepage. We're going to have a lot of fun talking about hockey for the next couple years. And if you are subscribed or you've been here for some time, think about joining our members page. The coach's staff is always bumping. It's the way you get attention. There's private chat rooms. There's first response to comments. We can even make a video for you. Big shout out to these beauties on the coach's staff. They're always our biggest cheerleaders. You are always our biggest cheerleaders. We love having each and every one of you here, whether you're a member, whether you're a subscriber, or whether you're just a viewer. Thank you for being here. Thank you for commenting down below. Now let's continue on with our analysis. Coaching is a big deal, and how you handle ice time is a big deal. So let's go ahead and take a look at the ice time for both lines. What we're considering line one for Edmonton is any line that has McDavid on it. If McDavid's on it, it's line one, folks. It's the way it goes. We know Edmonton changes up their lines like crazy. This is the way Jay Woodcroft gets it going. Look at all these line combinations. Take a look when you sort by minutes. They're really always switching up lines here. You can go to Money Puck. You can check it yourself. But let's be honest, any line that has McDavid on it, that's going to be the first line. He is the best player on the team. He's the guy that you want to go for. He's the GOAT. So line one is going to be McDavid. When we take a look at ice time with McDavid, he has 175 minutes. That's good for 52% of the ice time. This is what I mean by balance, folks. Jay Woodcroft knows how to get McDavid into the game, and he knows how to switch up McDavid's line mates to make sure that everybody's getting an opportunity to touch the puck. It's not just Kane and Draisaitl. There are a whole bunch of different combinations there with McDavid. We're going to explore them all in this video, but let's continue on. 52% for the ice time for anybody playing with McDavid. Line two, that is anybody playing with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Nugent-Hopkins is their second line center because Dry has been playing with McDavid for most of the series. The line two combinations with Nugent-Hopkins, normally it's Hyman and Puljujärvi, but there's a whole bunch of other combinations. 88 minutes, only good for 26%. So Nugent-Hopkins is out there as the centerman without McDavid anywhere in the equation, 26% of the time. Line three, that's the McLeod line. Anything with McLeod out there, that is going to be 62 minutes or 18%. So that's McLeod without McDavid. And then line four, that's the Ryan line. Anybody out there with Ryan is going to be considered line four. Yes, Archibald and Cassian, they move into line three and line two at points. Woodcroft's a mad scientist. He takes his beakers, he pours them together, concoctions spill out everywhere. The Mentos in the Coke bottle goes boom. That is what Woodcroft does. Woodcroft is hyper creative with his lines. He's hyper creative with his ice time, but you can see it here. He rides McDavid like the horse he is, and he should. The boy's a stallion. The other cool thing about Woody is how he balances his defensemen. Take a look at this even Steven balancing of defensemen. 162 for the Nurse Ceci line, 167 for the Keith Bouchard line, 128 for the Kulak Barry line. That's good enough for 35, 36, 29. You can basically call that a third. He's just rolling his defensemen. And why wouldn't you? When you took a look at all those stats that we looked at there, yes, the Nurse line has put in a lot of points, but don't worry, we're going to talk about that because the Nurse line is predominantly paired up with who? Connor McDavid, right? So those points end up jacking up. They end up running balanced lines here. Woody is quite smart at it because at the end of the day, Kulak and Barrie are actually his best defensive pairing at keeping pucks out of the net, if you can believe it. The Nurse line is the best pair at driving the play and helping McDavid score goals, but they don't get a lot of assists. So that says something at some point. Sometimes there is a third assist for a reason. And the Keith Bouchard line, they are doing quite well as well too. So really good line balancing by Jay Woodcroft here. I love the way he mixes it up. Colorado Avalanche, the same thing. Any line that Nathan MacKinnon on, that is going to be line one. 147 minutes for MacKinnon, regardless of who his wingers are going to be. That's good enough for 37% of the total time on ice. When you take a look at line two, that's Kadri. When Kadri gets out there with any combination of winger, it's 29% of the ice time. Then you go ahead and you take a look at line three. That's going to be the Kuemper, Burakovsky, and Aube-Kubel line. That is 77 minutes, good for 19%. And then when you take a look at line four, the Helm line, it's going to be good enough for 15%. So what you see is that the Oilers really hide line four, and they should. Do not give a lot of ice time for line four. You don't need to. You guys have heard me say this about line four. If you got a good line four like Tampa Bay, play it. Very few teams are going to have a line four like that. And if you got a bad line four that you need to hide it. That's great coaching. There's nothing wrong with not playing players in the playoffs. You got to play what's going to help you win. And there are many different ways to win. The key is, can the coach unlock the way to win? Can the coach identify the combination that's right within his team to perform the best? And I would say both Bednard and Woodcroft have done so. But I'm going to give the edge here to Woodcroft. He has done some unbelievable line matching here. He has done unbelievable line breakups and add-ons and put together. Woodcroft, Bednard, both good coaches. Woody, the interim guy, he's going to get the nod from me here. Taking a look at the defensive pairs here for the Colorado Avalanche. Toews and Makar, they are carrying 44% of the load. They should. Like I said, all you need to do is get your top four in there. And when you look at your top four, Johnson and Manson, they're getting 34%. I actually believe you need to give more ice time to your third pairing, which is Johnson and Byram at 22. I would give a little bit less to line two. I'd give a little more to pair three. I wouldn't touch line one. So I'd take that 34%. I'd feed 4% down into line three. I'd balance out my two bottom guys, and I'd be running Makar and Toews until they puked. And they won't. Defensemen don't get tired the way forwards do. It's not that they're in better condition. Skating backwards is simpler. The way they can control and see the game is simpler. Defensemen can simply play more minutes than forwards. So these are how the lines are shaking out going in. Special teams, obviously very important when we take a look at it. Power play for the Oilers, 28.21%. Penalty kill for the Oilers. Did anybody see this coming? Seriously, if you're an Oilers fan, you did. But if you're not an Oilers fan, you saw this coming, let me know. 85.37. That's amazing. What a kill. Kills win championships. Just ask the Tampa Bay Lightning, who averaged 85 and are now averaging 86 right now. This is a damn good kill by the Oilers. Underrated severely. The power play for the Colorado Avalanche, freak shows. 34.48. Absolute freak shows. Unstoppable force meets the immovable object. A top penalty kill versus a top power play. This is going to be exciting. But the penalty kill for the Avs falls off a cliff. 73.08. Ugh. Go ahead when Edmonton's 28.21% power play starts lighting it up with McDavid and Draisaitl on there. They are going to feast on that penalty kill of the Colorado Avalanche. So the nod in special teams for me, it's got to go to the Oilers. Even though the Avs have this unbelievable beast mode power play, the nod in special teams, Oilers all day. We're getting to the special sauce that we told you we're going to share with you, but we got one more slide before then, and that's X Factor players. X Factor players are players that are going to contribute and make or break this series. So we've gone ahead, we've listed the best players, the most important players for each team. We put an X beside their name. If we think they're an X Factor, throw up your X's. Connor McDavid, X Factor. 26 points, ranked number one. Leon Draisaitl, 26 points, ranked number one. Not an X Factor? You're going to have to wait for the next slides to wait and see why. Kane, oh my goodness. 12 goals, Mr. Evander Kane, ranked number five. Not an X Factor? you're going to have to wait till the next slide as well. Hyman, same thing, but Kane, Hyman, Draisaitl, McDavid in the traditional points metrics, if this is your bag, baby, they are dominant. They are killing it, and you might have an X factor beside them for your own analysis. That's totally okay. You let us know down below in the comments. Nugent-Hopkins comes in with 11 points on the series, ranked number 16 in the playoffs. Here are the X factors, though, that I think are more important for the Oilers, even more so than those top guys. Evan Bouchard. Bouchard, like I said, is blossoming into an elite defenseman. He's not there yet. He's blossoming. If Bouchard continues to play the way he's going to play, he's ranked number 42 right now for points. He's got 8 points right now. This guy could step up and be a huge X factor in this series. Darnell Nurse, X factor in the wrong direction. Yes, he is a plus 11. That is amazing, but he only has 3 points and he's ranked 137. If you think points matter, you got to be consistent. So if you're going to look at me and say Draisaitl's leading number 1, points are what matters, and then you come down to Nurse and you go, he's plus 11, it's different. Is it? Is it? You let me know down below in the comments, but Nurse with 3 points, that's not what I'm expecting out of my $9.5 million defenseman. So awesome that he's a plus 11, but he needs to pick it up. If Nurse picks it up, the Oilers are going to go even higher into the stratosphere, and Mike Smith is obviously an X factor in this series. Taking a look at the Avs, you've got MacKinnon, Kadri, Rantanen, Makar, and Kuemper. Kadri, we're going to talk about. I normally only throw 4 X factors in, but I'd throw the bonus one that is Nazem Kadri. MacKinnon is greatness. He is fantastic. 10 goals. He is above McDavid and Draisaitl. The only one near him is Kane. So MacKinnon carries, ranked number 9. MacKinnon is going to be a big player here. I cannot wait to see McDavid versus MacKinnon. Kadri is an X factor. He's got 10 points, ranked number 21. Why is he an X factor? What Kadri are we going to get? Are we going to get the Kadri that wants to score goals? If Kadri does to the Oilers what he did to the Blues, Nazem Kadri could be living rent-free in the Edmonton Oilers' heads. Nazem Kadri is a massive X factor because when people start focusing on Kadri, they end up losing sight of the game. You lose sight of the game. Kadri is both good enough to score on you, and MacKinnon, Rantanen, Landeskog, and Nichushkin, they're going to make you pay. So you cannot overcommit or worry about Nazem Kadri. You just got to play your game, but that's easier said than done with one of the best pests in the NHL. Mikko Rantanen, look, he's got 10 assists. He doesn't have enough goals. He's an X factor because if Rantanen starts scoring, look out. He is underperforming in the goal department, and that is not like Rantanen. So if he figures it out in round 3, we are going to see more balanced scoring for the Avs. It's going to be a huge deal. Landeskog, 11 points. Nichushkin, 11 points. Cale Makar, of course, he's an X factor. Can Makar put the points in the net while being assigned to Connor McDavid and keep points out of the net? Only time will tell. The elite defenseman versus the elite offensive player, we will see who ends up winning this matchup. But his ability to perform against Connor McDavid, that is going to make him the X factor for the Colorado Avalanche. And then, of course, Darcy Kuemper. If Kuemper can step up and find his game the way we know he has his game, of course, that will swing the series. All right, so it's special time. Let's talk about Connor McDavid. Hey, guys, head over to theathletic.com. Take a look at it. I understand it's paid content, but there's nothing wrong with paid content. I pay for it. I'm not sponsored by them. There was an awesome article here about Connor McDavid, and I'm going to throw up this graph. It's called Connor McDavid has reached a new level. Thank you to The Athletic for putting this through here. And my own take on this is very simple. When you take a look at what McDavid's doing, just look at that 2022 playoff line that is above 3. That is Connor McDavid's GSAA, game score above average. Remember, I told you that's the number that incorporates every stat in the game, how you're playing, how McDavid is playing, and how he is contributing to the Edmonton Oilers for game score above average. And it is higher than any point in his career. All those little squiggly lines, those are his best 11-point stretches. You can see McDavid has never reached this height before. He has only gotten better in this playoffs. We are seeing the best version of Connor McDavid we have ever seen. We are watching greatness on a different level right now, and it is McDavid versus McDavid. The Athletic also had another interesting graph, GSVA, same thing as GSAA. It is telling you the game score value add or game score above average. Either way, it's a one number capture that will tell you how he is performing. And right now, McDavid is an 11.2 in the playoffs. Since 2008, here are all the best performances in the playoffs. Nathan MacKinnon, 2021, 8.9. Then take a look. Nathan MacKinnon, 7.3. MacKinnon has been dominant in the playoffs. And then you see 7s down to 6s. These are the best players at the best time in the playoffs. Sidney Crosby is 7.0 and Connor McDavid is 11.2. Not only is Connor McDavid beating his personal best, he is shattering the best of the best ever in the NHL by a mile. Now, for all you basketball lovers and basketball fans, you know as well as I do that superstars win championships. You got LeBron on your team. LeBron can take you to the ship, especially prime time, prime age LeBron. What he did with that Cavaliers team was incredible. It was LeBron, basically junk, and they end up beating the Golden State Warriors. Basketball has always been a superstar-driven league because really you're only playing with 11 players and your first 5 on the court are going to play almost all the minutes. That's why superstars matter so much. In hockey, you don't get that kind of ice time like you do court time. There's 20 players. There's more balance. It is a much more team-friendly game. But let's go ahead and pull up this graph anyway, because when you take a look at values and wins, on the red, you're looking at NBA superstars. The best NBA superstar has a GSVA of 18.5. The next top 5 NBA players, 13.5. That shows you what we just talked about, which you already know as an NBA and a sports fan, is that the superstar, LeBron, wins championships. Well, let's go take a look at Connor McDavid, because when you look at the NHL, I would argue now that Connor McDavid is doing more for the Edmonton Oilers alone than LeBron James did for the Cleveland Cavaliers or an elite NBA player does, and you can see it. An 11.2 GSVA compared to the top 8. The top 8 all-time playoff contributors, 4.8. Nathan MacKinnon's in that category. Crosby's in that category. 11.2 versus 4.8. What does that mean? It means Connor McDavid is 2.1 times a bigger contributor to the Edmonton Oilers' success than the top 3 NHL players average. McDavid, nobody else. That is what this is telling you. This is telling you, these 3 graphs, that you are seeing greatness on another level. We are seeing a moment in history right now that has not been captured maybe ever. You got to remember these moments. These are the moments you talk to your grandkids about. This is unbelievable stuff. McDavid, everybody, I believe, outside of Colorado is cheering for you. In my opinion, when you start seeing greatness like this, people want to see it continue. I want to see it continue. I want to see him finish it. I want to see him take this home, because if you don't win the Stanley Cup, kid, it will all be for nothing. It will be the best individual performance ever, and the response will be simple. Well, it's a team game. One more to take a look at here. Remember when we talked about and we said the Oilers were shallow as a kiddie pool? Remember when guys got on me about that and said, no, it's not just McDavid. We got to talk about Kane. We got to talk about Draisaitl. We got to talk about Hyman. Here's some data. And again, I always let the data do the talking. We don't pull this out of our backside. We end up going to moneypuck.com and we consolidate those graphs that you ended up seeing. And what you are going to see on your screen right now is all the line combinations in the playoffs with Connor McDavid. They're up there. Connor McDavid has played 173 minutes over the playoffs in some combination of these lines, the main one being Draisaitl, Kane, and McDavid. We know right now, if you take a look at the goals for, that there are 23 Connor McDavid goals for. Whatever line McDavid's on, they've scored 23 times. Whatever line McDavid's not on has been scored on 8 times. Goals per 60 minutes with Connor McDavid out there, 7.94. Goals per 60 minutes against with Connor McDavid out there, 2.76. So let's go ahead and take a look at lines without Connor McDavid. You take McDavid off a line, let's see what ends up happening. Well, there's 202 minutes played without Connor McDavid. So McDavid's played 173. The Oilers have played 202 minutes without him. When you look at goals for, they have scored 5 goals for without Connor McDavid on a line. 23 goals for with McDavid, 5 goals for without Connor McDavid. They have 8 goals against with Connor McDavid. Well, they got 9 goals against without Connor McDavid. Goals per 60 minutes, 1.48. Goals per 60 minutes with Connor McDavid, 7.94. Goals against per 60 minutes without Connor McDavid, 2.66. Goals against with Connor McDavid, 2.76. All right, coach. We're seeing some kind of point here, but come on, man. Kane and Draisaitl. It's Draisaitl, man. It's the second best player in the world. When McDavid isn't with him, you cannot be telling me that Hyman, Kane, and Draisaitl aren't elite players. Holland didn't do an amazing job by signing these guys. I got one more graph for you. Here are the lines with Draisaitl, Hyman, or Kane driving the bus. No McDavid, Draisaitl, or Hyman, or Kane. Every combination of them. No McDavid, one of the other big three. 105 minutes of ice time has been captured with these three without McDavid. Goals for? 3. Goals for? 3. Goals for with Connor McDavid? 23. Goals for without McDavid and Draisaitl, Kane, or Hyman is 3. Goals against is 6. Goals for 60, 1.7. Goals against per 60, 3.4. Look, you can feel any way you want to feel about the data. The data is the data. The eye test is the eye test. The feeling is the feeling. If you're an emotional Oilers fan, you're so wrapped up in the cup win that is coming and you can feel it, you don't want to hear it. But we talk to everybody on this channel and you can see it. My narrative hasn't changed. The data doesn't give me a reason to change it. We are watching greatness on a different level. We are watching the Connor McDavid show, baby. And I freaking love it. And I am not turning off the channel. So that brings us to the end of our video. Our pick. Do I have the Oilers? Do I have the McDavid show? Do I have the greatness? Do I have Mike Smith on top of the roller coaster? Or do I have the Colorado Avalanche with the amazing Nathan MacKinnon, the deep top 6, Makar and Toews, Kuemper rebounding? My answer is very simple. I have the Oilers in 6. I am going to go with greatness on a different level. As much as there is balance, team, and law of averages, Avs fans are going to talk about this, and pragmatic betting odds are going to talk about this. Everyone's going to talk about this. Law of averages means that McDavid must cool down at some point. Law of averages means that the Avs team that has more depth, that is better, that is more balanced all over the roster should end up taking this one. But I'm sorry, I think we're seeing a shift. I think we're seeing an outlier that we may never see again. I think we are seeing God mode, baby. Greatness on a different level. And I think Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers will not be figured out by the Colorado Avalanche. And I do not think Darcy Kuemper is good enough to keep pucks out of the net, even if it is one guy driving with his 3 amigos, the 3 Musketeers, who turned out to be 4 because it was always 4, and I never understood that as a child. Let me know down below why 3 Musketeers had 4. The 3 Musketeers, Kane, Draisaitl, Hyman, and McDavid, are going to carry in 6. I don't see the Colorado Avalanche stopping them. However, if the Avs win, that's okay. But I can't bet against McDavid.